Okay, so what we've just done, because I didn't do anything. Just so we're clear, what you have just done as a come in, huddle in. What you have just done is gathered data. Now we've used a timeline to do that. We've gone from Monday through to Thursday night, and we've gathered data from all of you about how you felt over that time. Now, timelines are a really versatile tool because you can actually put anything on here. If you were working with a team that are working to deliver something, you might pre-populate some key things on here. Certainly if you're looking at a sort of 6-week spell or something like that, you might sort of remind them of key dates. We had a retrospective on that date. We did a planning session then. That was when we had to present to the board. And you might want to draw that. That was when it snowed. That was when we did that major release, whatever it may be. But you might want to put those things on. You might want to get them to add some of the things on there, you can take it very, very down to task, and even that generates insight because people see things in different ways when you discuss them. It could be what we've done here is purely focused on emotion. We could talk about, you could frame this however you wanted. So literally what I've said to you is just think about how you felt during the week. And we'll explore that in a minute. But there's so many other ways you could tackle this and questions you could be asking. Where did you feel, so just thinking of this week, let's just look at the processes. Let's take a minute on the top half of this maybe to just look at the processes we used this week. Well, we did the check-in, check-out, we went through change control, we did this. Okay, now let's look at how those processes worked for us out of 5 on each one, and you're generating that insight, and you can explore actually, well, where were the processes not working for us, what made us angry, what worked well for us, and you can explore those things on a timeline. So timelines are quite versatile. We're using faces quite deliberately because I've probably leaned a bit more towards the sort of emotional stuff because this is what software teams don't tend to do. They tend to focus on what went wrong with the code, what went wrong with the technical, and actually and the reason I'm pushing this with you guys, with you, is that if you're going in and offering that fresh way of doing a retrospective, offering a little different perspective, this is quite a good way of doing it. You're like, right, and also you're probably more in your comfort zone than actually it going very, very technical. So if you were working as a team over the last 4 days, it would be really interesting to look for commonality here. You might go through and say, okay, so I can see there's a big event here and we all felt like that. I can see there's quite a big event here and we all, okay, so this was interesting. So if you imagine for a second you're all a big team. So this thing that happened on Wednesday, that's quite interesting. One of you was happy, 2 of you were kind of thoughtful. This person was kind of thumbs up at the end of it. Someone here was really, really unhappy. Why did we get those differences of opinions? What happened? Can we talk that through and explore that? Now, does anyone want to take a punt at any of these moments? There's a very big smiley face. Anyone want to share what one of those big smiley faces was about? Anyone want to tell us about a big smiley face event from this week? Does anyone remember if they put a big smiley face on the board? Or anywhere on the board?
Maybe more towards Thursday and Friday.
Yeah.
People are getting more smiley face, possibly because it's getting closer to the weekend time, or they might have got something done at work.
Anyone got a real one? One of these that was a real thing that they thought about? Actually, I'm putting smiley there because I had a smiley moment on Tuesday or Wednesday or something.
Yeah, on Tuesday morning I was really happy because I'm trying to set up project management community practice.
Yeah.
So I was preparing a short presentation about what I was going to talk about, knowledge sharing, how we could do it better, and also I was trying to find ways of my team to kind of tell me their expectations and how they thought we could run the community of practice. So I was really happy.
Cool. How did it go? Has it stayed a smiley face? Ah.
Because eventually most of them were kind of reluctant to share the knowledge with others because of fear of jeopardizing their job. They were not comfortable telling others about things that were not going well with their project. So I was really excited in the morning because I thought it was going to be a great way to kind of learn together and share their feedback kind of.
Pause for a second. So what we set the stage when we arrived, and I gave you a nice sort of warm-up talk on stage. We've done the data gathering, which was you going through this process of adding smiley faces. very, very simple exercise in itself, but as you go through it, when you're putting the smiley face on, you're actually recounting what happened during the week. So it's like gathering data. You're sort of bringing in things that you never thought you'd be talking about right now, even 5 minutes ago. So we're actually expanding that arena of what we're looking at. We're making it clear, and we're all getting that common understanding of where we're looking. In terms of generating insight, I was just asking you to explore some of those and tell the stories around them. Now, there's a few things that we did there. Firstly, we reinforced earlier in the setting the stage bit, this is a safe environment. And I think we all, everyone who spoke felt comfortable talking openly with the group, which was quite nice. Now, a couple of things that I didn't do. Well, what I did do was ask quite open questions. What I didn't do was go straight into, okay, right, so what are we going to do about that? How would you do that differently? Because if I'd done that over here, then straight away I'm almost closing down the next conversation. Nobody wants to talk next after that. So what we're doing is kind of opening. Let's open that, great. And then, and anyone else, and so open, let everybody have their voice and get those ideas in. Because the aim is to be generating insights at that stage, not doing the next bit, which is deciding what to do, which is the next phase. When you're happy you spent enough time at that generating insights bit, when everyone's had a voice, and if we weren't rushing for pizza, I would have started trying to draw ideas out of people that may be more in that kind of vacationer mode, perhaps in our meeting, maybe sort of around and off somewhere else, possibly. But we'd have kind of got everyone involved in sharing those, and then we'd have, when that kind of dried up, we would then sort of move on to the deciding what to do bit. So let's move on to deciding what to do. Now, when you've got a team working together, the simplest way of doing that with a continuous team is looking at things that they want to start, stop, or continue doing. So if you've got a team working together, it's like, okay, so what? So you've got some of those things that went really well, some of those things that went really badly, things you want to continue. There might be brand new. So you'd sort of be exploring, actually, there's a new thing we want to start doing as a team, there's something we want to stop doing, there's things we want to continue doing. That's one technique you might want to use. You can choose your own words. You might decide it may not naturally fit and you can try something else. But that's just one idea of the team, sort of trying to funnel that down into those ideas. What you've also done, because without deciding what to do, we're trying to funnel it down a bit right now. So we're saying, okay, so we've got these few ideas. Maybe I could have been drawing things up here as we were talking, so I could have actually written down a few of the... I could have been putting a few key thoughts down. So we could have taken that one there and sort of drawn around that and sort of made a note. It was about the end of year, lots of projects. And we might have talked about the wherever your happy, sad bit was. I forget which, but just for example, we might have done that for that bit and talked about what that was. We might have kind of drawn a couple of those. And then as a group, we might say, okay, so let's move into deciding what to do. Now, one of the ways you can easily do that, sometimes it comes quite naturally. There's a couple of really big things that the team wants to talk about because they're quite strong. The other thing you can do is a thing called dot voting that works quite well. Because again, everybody has a voice in the room. Are we familiar with dot voting? No? Dot voting. So the things that I've got circles around are areas that we've explored and generated insights into. What I would do is you have that and you, right. So you have 3 votes and you can decide what we're going to focus on for decide what to do bit. You can put them all on one thing if you feel strongly about it, or you can decide to do a mix of things. And basically what you would do, you would go up to the board with your 3 dots. Let's imagine that was something you were perhaps super passionate about. You might put 3 dots on it. And put one somewhere else, maybe on one of the others, and Ken would go up and Ken would offer his opinions on his. And after everyone's done, you can do little stickers or whatever you might want to go for it. But after that, we sort of go through and the team sort of basically look at that and go, okay, well, it's quite clear from all of you adding dots that actually this is the area that we want to focus on because that's the one that's got the most dots in it. So that's one the team feel is the one that they want to focus on and they want to move forward on. So we've decided that's the area we want to focus on. What do we want to do about that? And let's just come back to a couple of hours to explore. So firstly, if we look at year 1, for example, what have we got any suggestions for what we could have changed or what we'd like to do differently? Is it something that's going to happen again, or was that a complete one-off?
Yes, that was the first meeting.
Okay.
Kind of thing
Okay.
Initiative. Okay.
So what went really well out of it that you would absolutely take forward to the next one? What were the successful bits?
What went well is that they recognize the need of learning.
Mm-hmm.
It
Magic.
was going to be informal, even though
Yeah.
Some of them didn't feel comfortable to share. I won't say their failure because for them they appeared as showing their weaknesses or failure. Saying that something went wrong with my project could mean that, oh, I'm not good at doing my job.
Has anyone got any? So just using that stop, start, continue, what we've got down there is actions that come out of our retro that we've agreed quite quickly in that environment. So actually, we're going to continue with the environment that you created because if that was the right environment and that's something you want to carry on with next time round. What you want to start doing is having this model of actually people being able to write ideas anonymously beforehand so you can bring those in and start exploring them. Post-it notes are quite good for that in the room, actually. And web surveys in advance, because you use those, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, and I think we're going to stop doing formal slides. There you go, there's your action. I would generally have the group coming up with ideas and taking their own actions and either putting them into their Jira board or taking those actions away with them. I've done it like this because pizza. But generally, on a serious note, the more the team does themselves, the more they own the outcome. What I've just done is not ideal because even though it's your scenario and your idea, I didn't go through those with you and say, does that sound like the ones that came with the others? Is that would that be what you want to do? Do you commit to those? You writing those down would be far more powerful because they're your ideas and you're taking them forwards, for example. The other thing is, normally you would be a team. So actually these ideas would not be yours going away with those actions. It would be the whole team are committing to these. Absolutely, and maybe even you sort of get them all up on a wall at the end and say, yeah, those look good, we're kind of going for that. If they've got a physical Kanban board, a physical Scrum board, putting those on the board is quite powerful because they're visual every time they're standing up around it and moving things through the model. So, we were doing was taking a timeline of just this week, Monday to Thursday, and what I asked the team to do was draw them there with happy faces, sad faces, or different symbols if they weren't happy with faces, around really their emotions at different times during the week. Now, if you look at a team, you'd be looking at commonality around that. Why were you all feeling, or differences? Why were 7 of you really, really happy on Tuesday and 1 person was sad? Let's kind of explore those things. But crucially, everyone looked a bit hesitant to start with. We put a little key at the side to give people an idea of what faces might look like, which sounds silly, but is actually really, really useful. And people then started getting into it. That was the gathering data exercise. In terms of the generating insight, we then got a few people to sort of talk about, just talk us through some of the things you put on there. What were the key highlight points, happy points, sad points, where you were really frustrated, the idea points, and people shared those ideas. That was a lot of the generating insight. Crucially, in the facilitation stage, it was a lot of open questions and building on. And what did you think? And how do we, so you're kind of really opening things up during that point and exploring it. And then, once you've got through there, you're then looking at what we're going to do, what are the outcomes. So then into what are the actions. What you can do, as you're talking through those stories, you can start drawing and making links and connections on here. So we went from that problem face there to that really happy face there. We went from this terrified face to the frowny face a little while later on the same day. So you're drawing on those, turning those emotions into those connected stories as people are talking. And then you're kind of exploring, right, which of these stories are the ones that we want to take forward to make action on? I think you guys did dot voting over there. We did dot voting over here with some of these, which were the ones we wanted to take forwards. And then what we did was say, well, actually, let's take one of these and let's look at, we used stop, start, continue to say for this item, what would we do differently? What are we going to start doing differently for next time we do this? Because this was a thing that was going to happen again next time around. What are we going to stop doing that really, really didn't work for us? And what kind of work that we'd like to continue doing? And we came up with those, and that basically was our action going forward. We had an action. We had an action of 2 things that we were going to start doing differently. One that we were going to kill off. In this case, it was formal slides in a presentation that was supposed to be quite a relaxed, informal affair. And the continue one was actually, they felt the environment was the right place for the meeting and they wanted to keep it that way. So we explored those items, stop, start, continue. Now, had it been, that was one person's action because in reality, they're not a team in real life. But had that been a team that was in real life, that would have been something that as a team, they would have committed to as an action. They'd have all taken those away, ideally stuck those on their board if they're using a physical board. And doing that either one of two ways. I like it if they actually run that through the board and have it as something they're moving across with the rest of their cards, because it should be their work that they're moving through. Sometimes teams prefer to take it up the top because they see it as something more abstract and don't see it as part of their board, which is fine, as long as it's up there and visible and they're talking about it during the week and it doesn't get forgotten. So the key there is to keep it alive for the team as much as you can. Crucially, as much as you can get done in the team with you as pure facilitator is great, even the writing things down, because then the ownership and commitment stays with the team. Ultimately, as facilitator, you're not going to go away and do this work. As a scrum master, you're not going to be doing this work. If the team aren't committed to these things after the meeting, nothing's going to change, and it's all about the outcomes of the meeting. Over this our little mission involves that flip chart over there, which you will see has a wonderful piece of art that I take no credit for whatsoever. And we have a sailing boat with wind blowing and anchors hanging out of it. And this is a very tenuous metaphor. Because what I would like you to think about, and just doodle on these little post-it notes here, are the things, if this is you this week, and do this real. Don't worry about the fact you're not in a team together. Just think about it for real. This is you getting through your week this week, blowing towards the island that is the weekend. And it looks lovely at the weekend. It's got palm trees and beaches and everything. It's wonderful. Now, crucially, what are the things that are propelling you forward? So the wind blowing, what are the things that have been filling your sails this week and driving you forwards? And what are the things that have been the anchors for you this week? What have been the things that have been holding you back, slowing you down, bogging you down? So that's what I want you to think about. Grab post-it notes, take a couple of minutes yourself, just scribble a few down, and when you're ready, just slap them on at the top or the bottom, just to indicate what the things are that are propelling you forwards, or the things that are kind of holding you back. Right, for this side, for those of you that were here, what they were doing here to gather data, there was a playing around with a rather awkward metaphor of a sailing ship heading towards this lovely island, which is the weekend, where you've got a sailing ship with wind blowing into the sails, propelling it forwards, and you've got anchors out the back holding it back. So the question the team were asked to imagine is, this week, what are the things that have been propelling you forwards? And this week, what are the things that have been dragging you, slowing you down and blocking you? And same, they were asked to do that independently with post-it notes, write them down independently, then stick them on and share them. Then went through that and explored, talked through some of those ideas, explored them in a bit of detail. I'm not sure how much commonality there was, but if you've got a team that work together all the time, chances are you'll find a lot of commonality, or where there's conflict, to explore those. Something may be absolutely terrible for the tester, but it may have been great for the dev people, or vice versa, or different groups entirely. But you can explore those differences, those conflicts, and explore those in a safe environment. And then again, you're bringing it back to the actions. How did you do actions? Or
So what we did, you're quite right, sort of broke down things individually. We did go through an exercise of grouping, common themes, although obviously not the same, but we did try to look at common themes. We talked around, so we talked about accentuating the positives, making sure that none of the actions we take will come away from the positives, the things that are propelling us forward. So that was a key one. On the bottom half, when we were looking at the anchors, there were a couple there where we felt that individual suggestions might help individuals in the situation. So we had somebody suffering from very bad post-holiday blues.
yeah.
So some suggestions around how we could spark things up.
So coming up with the analogy of going off to a nice island in the sun didn't really help much, no? Oops.
No, exactly. We talked around, there was a lot of travel chaos and getting backwards and forwards to work, and maybe even talked about how we could perhaps change working hours as an experiment over a couple of periods, strikes around or whatever, different working places. We didn't actually get down to writing the actions forward, but we got to the point where we picked out by dot voting the three most important things we wanted to talk about, and then we started to get to the point where we could take actions, and we would commit to those actions.
Gotcha. Those aren't the only within that framework of following that model of gathering data, generating insights and bringing it through to actions, closing out cleanly. There's an infinitesimal number of ways you can do that. For a very, very technical project, you might actually be using very, very technical data you want to explore. Certainly if you're doing a data analysis project, maybe you'd be using real data. Let's look at the stats on how much stuff we have in the database today. If you're doing a project that we've focused on emotion there, you could be actually doing almost a code review, to use a very extreme example, of using that as your data that you're generating insight from. So you can use that framework and put a million different ways around it. Encourage your teams to mix it up and don't get bored, because if you do the same retro format from time and time again, firstly, you'll start getting very, very similar answers. And secondly, you'll end up getting very, very blinkered. You'll be missing huge things. If we keep talking about the technology, we miss the emotional stuff. If we keep talking about the emotional stuff, we may miss the fact that the underlying process is broken. So do keep mixing up and looking at things with a fresh perspective. So there's a few ideas around the room. So the generating insights idea, this one here, is called the learning matrix. And the idea is you're getting people to use post-it notes or pens or whatever with a very, very simple 2x2. I love 2x2s because I've got an MBA there. We get very excited about a good 2x2. But basically, you're looking at 4 quadrants there saying things that made us happy, things that make us sad, great things that were inspirational, great ideas. And the flowers bit, the bouquet of flowers there is, let's just shout out and recognise others in the team that did something awesome for us. Because, it's kind of nice to celebrate those things and celebrate and recognise the others in your team. And maybe you don't always get a chance to do that cleanly. So that's a nice opportunity out of that one. That's in terms of gathering data. Another gathering data idea here is looking at a radar diagram, getting the team to do a quick on paper, mark yourselves out, look at our team values and mark where we think we sit on these out of 10. How do we sit on giving each other feedback as a team? How do we say, are we a courageous team? Do we keep things simple? How do we communicate? Everyone putting their scores down, averaging those out, and then plotting those on a graph. How did we score as a team? Well, does that feel right to us? Does that feel like where we are as a team? Do we want to improve on these things? How could we improve courage if that's what we wanted to improve? You then explore that and take that one forward. In terms of going through the other steps, this is more about looking at insights. Once we've gathered the data, this is a good way of actually looking at what we getting more insight out of it. We may decide actually if we're a lot of the time with the insight, you may have conversations, but if it's more technical or people are struggling with drawing that insight out of it, you might decide to do something like a fishbone diagram. Let's look at this through the lenses of what, where, who, when, why. Maybe the 5 whys would be an option on there as well. Yes, sir. I would typically be, it's rare that there is a single root cause for the complex problems. There's normally lots of them. I would typically be using that if we'd done the data gathering, we were starting to generate insights and we were getting stuck with the generating insights. Say we've had this problem, okay, great, let's talk about that. Some of the ones we've had today are actually quite simple, but let's take, so example from where we've run a workshop in an organisation and actually that hasn't gone as well as we thought. Well, that's suddenly one thing, but it's quite a complex issue. And maybe we might want to say, well, if as a facilitator I see the team is struggling with that, let's just take that one thing and let's just try and break that down a little bit. So it's quite good for that generating insight. So yes, it is expanding, but sometimes that's necessary to be able to go reductive again afterwards.
I've just thought something. Maybe not voting on the results of that
would give you the ones that you want to focus on, because then you're going, right, so having pulled these out, which of these are the ones that we're taking forwards? Because you're never going to take everything forward and fix everything in the next period. What else have we got around? This was this over here. Who watched Top Gear back when it was on BBC? You had a cool wall, if everyone remembers that, where basically they would look at the cars that had been released that week and they'd say, well, where would this car fit on the wall? And they'd have a big debate between them about whether this car was really, really cool or whether it was absolutely uncool. If right at the top of the wall was Sub-Zero. So this was something the team would look at and you sort of say, okay, well, let's do this through the lens of a Top Gear session. And we say, what are all the things that we did this week? And let's just take some of these things that we did, that we delivered, that we achieved. And so the cards are not actually about insights into where they fit in terms of wind and things moving us forward to holding that, but just significant things that happened and then starting to get into a debate about where they fit on a board. Let's generate the insight of all these things we delivered. How do we feel about that? Does that make us a super cool Sub-Zero awesome team? Is there stuff that actually makes us a seriously uncool team? What are the things we want to do about that as a team? one that I did for generating data once I've not got here, I created about 5 or 6 very, very simple open questionnaires, put them on a clipboard, had a kid's fake microphone, and we did TV interviews. Now, it was only us in the room, safe environment, bit weird, but it was fun. And one of us would take it in turn to be the interviewer, one would be the interviewee, and they wouldn't have seen the questions. And I'd be asking, so how do you feel this week went? And what you found with those is actually when people got over the initial ooh-ness of it and got relaxed into it, the panic was over. They then actually gave very, very honest, frank answers. There wasn't that time to think. Everyone got into that role playing that they were somebody who was being interviewed live on television. There wasn't time for thinking. You just had to speak confidently. And you've got some quite frank, honest answers out of that while somebody else was scribbling those down on a board. And then we did the exploring it afterwards, and then we did a reductive thing down around that. On the screen, there is a book that I highly recommend. If you are to buy this book and look at it, you will find some of the things I've talked about tonight being uncannily familiar. Mainly because I read this book about 3 years ago and loved it with a passion and have sort of evolved things from there. If you want to dive into this more, it's good. And I can't recommend it enough. But crucially, take the leaf out of our book in terms of working in your PMO. There's no reason why you have to be an Agile software team to do retrospectives. And the best way to learn how to do retrospectives is to play around with them and practice them. So back at your office, start introducing these into your regular PMO cadence. Start modeling good retros and seeing what they look and feel like. The worst thing that will happen is you will continuously improve your PMO. The best thing that will happen is you're continuously improving your PMO and you're helping others in the organization be that critical friend, be that advisor, helping them break out of those kind of blinkered situations they're in by giving them fresh perspective and new ideas for their retros. Now, one final thing I would ask of you before you grab a final beer and a final sort of bit of pizza and all those kind of things. So I talked about our retros. We looked at what went well and what we'd like to change on those for our team. And that's kind of what I'd like to do really, really quickly now with you. So using this simple format here where I'm collecting things that went well and things that we would change if we were to do something like this again, or if I were to do this again for a different group of people or anything like that. So I just want to explore this with you quickly. So still in our safe environment, can I just ask you if anyone's got some things they really liked about this evening? Pizza. And it turned up. Was it on time? On time. Pizza on time. Go on. What else we got?
The different approaches for retrospectives. Keep it very.
Anyone else? Carry on. A bit more. What do we mean by mixing it up?
Well, he's just giving us a range of approaches that we can use different approaches each time to keep things fresh.
So encouraged to mix it up. We like the informal approach of the evening. Yeah, this is about as formal as I get, I'm afraid.
I think a blend of theory and practice works really well for learning experience.
Theory.
What do they call that in Agile world? Like learning by, no, what is it? What do they call it?
Don't know.
Learning by doing.
Learning by doing? Yeah. Don't know. Sounds good. Sounds convincing. Sorry, I've let you down. Things you'd like to change. John knows his terminology.
Things I'd like to change.
What we?
Being late. It should have been late. It was on time.
Okay, so we've got so pizza on time in both categories. So we've done a few of these here. The pizza has been very late every single time. Yeah, and this is the first time it's actually turned up early for once. What else we got? What will we change about tonight?
Well, yeah, we'll probably carry on from the pizza thing, just a bit more time doing the practical side of things.
So more of the practical, yeah?
Well, I wouldn't say more, but just a bit more time doing it.
More time for the practical.
Yeah.
Balance. There are a few templates here that we didn't get the chance to try out.
Now, that's probably down to me not explaining properly, because a lot of I'd intended to do the session here and the session there. I'd like to have swapped you over with those if I could have done, but the rest of these around were genuinely just to share, to show you examples of how things work. So I was under no impression that I was going to get around those. Those were just ideas to generate. But I had hoped I'd be able to swap you around and do both of those with both of you. More time for the practical stuff. Yeah. Anything else that we change about tonight? I was going to say, people were cold, right? Cold.
Don't you think this is brutal when it's you?
Hmm?
It could potentially be really brutal, but it could be awful.
This is a safe, frank environment. You have to put yourself in that situation where you're saying, we're doing this because it's a safe environment and we're propelling ourselves forward as a team. Absolutely. Well, you would hope people are being constructive, yes. So there is that kind of respect. But equally, this is not how we normally talk. The fact that you're all now, if you look at it, you're my guests in my bar, in my office, and there's been beer and pizza and everything, and people, and a lot of us are very, very British and polite and may say thank you very much. This is uncomfortable for everybody, right? And yeah, this is where actually, yeah.
Because it means that, it's just as important. Well, that person, that person. And, it's important you get it up there. And if somebody's felt that the room is too cold, then say it.
Yeah.
Have it out.
And it doesn't matter if your view differs to other people's, let's get these things out there. If everybody said this was great and we had nothing here, then how would this improve? How would flash mobs get better in the future? How would events in this bar get better in the future? How would I get better at standing on stage and talking and sharing things with people? I wouldn't. So with that in mind, I have to say, come on, let's get uncomfortable and let's get into that place where we're changing things. Actually, yeah, if you're rotating the facilitator between retros, it works. One of the good things, so where we talked about the dot voting and activities over there, dot voting is a very democratic way of getting the ideas focused on something that is a democratic team decision. So one person cannot dominate when you're dot voting on the items. That is then coming from the team. The other thing that's quite useful to have in those situations is putting up a parking lot. Have everyone used parking lots in meetings where you have a board? So, right, we've got these, okay. I get that this is a big issue, and maybe this is one that needs a separate session. Maybe it's something you and I need to put. We're going to put this. We're not going to kill this conversation. What we're going to do is put that in the parking lot. We're coming back to that one now. We're moving on. Is quite a good way of closing that down. But then to build trust, you do need to then go away and make sure that conversation happens. Otherwise, in the next retrospective you're running, and they start talking, and you try and say that, it won't work because they won't trust you, and the trust is an important thing in it. So there's a couple of things there. If you want any credibility as a facilitator, if you're putting things on a parking lot, you have to go back to those items on the parking lot. If you're doing a 2 or 3, and ignoring retros for a minute, if you're doing a sort of a planning workshop and things like that, it may be something that you put on there. I would normally grab that person in a lunch break or afterwards. Can we have a few minutes? Can we just explore this item? What do we do next with this? So this was clearly the wrong forum to bring this up. What should the next step be? And you work it through with that person. Because, okay, that's not going to get fixed today. This is not the right environment, or that would need something separate. What do we do? And you agree in action with them for that item and then follow through on it. If you're not doing that, if people are, then everyone in the room is suddenly looking at that board and seeing it filling up massively as the elephant in the room in the corner. No one's going to accept their items being put on a backlog. No one, sorry, on a parking lot. They will say, well, no, actually, this is important. And then you start losing control. There needs to be trust. As part of that contract you have as a facilitator with the team is the trust that if something's going on there, it's not a way of discounting it and putting it to the side and just keeping you quiet. Ideally, the individuals should, or the team should be writing their own actions because they're the team's actions. And part of that, the ceremony side of writing something or opening a ticket and typing it into a system or however you do those actions in the team, that process is a ceremony in its own right, and with that comes commitment. I am writing down that we are taking this action. I am writing down that I will do. I am putting on the system and pressing that save or commit button that this is something we will do. It's not an action that John from the PMO is taking away and will email out to everyone in 2 days' time. Because I can guarantee they won't care in 2 days' time. They'll have moved on and forgotten all about it. That goes back to the going around again. Experimenting, does it work? Back into retro ideas, back around again. And some things aren't easy fixes. They will take more than 2 or 3 iterations, 4 or 5 iterations to fix. Sometimes, even longer. Any other changey things? Or are we kind of...
Can I be brutal?
Yes, yes, please be brutal.
The first bit was a bit too long.
Yeah, it was. Did I ramble too much? I rambled, right? Yeah, I'm getting some nods. Mostly from my team. Going, yes, again, yes, you rambled. No, well, we talked about anonymous. We talked about options of people submitting things in advance. We talked about people putting things on post-it note. The idea, I mean, the smiley, frowny faces up there, for example. I wasn't clear on who put what faces down, and people could talk about them. So there's that slight anonymity. I suppose there's that safety of putting something up, but generally speaking, it's a safe environment. I would expect people to be putting post-it notes and ideas up that they are willing to talk about and share, because that's what that environment's like. You're typically talking about a team that work together to share. If it's anonymous and people aren't prepared to talk about their items, then are you achieving what you set out to be, which is a team who are learning, adapting, improving themselves? The other frustrating thing about the idea of anonymous feedback is that actually it's not always that insightful. People may know what they wrote down and what they thought they meant when they wrote it, but you may come to it afterwards and haven't got a clue what they meant, which means a lot of that message gets lost sometimes. So yeah, open, honest as much as you can. In some senses, that's just part of facilitating, because every meeting will have that mix of people that need more time to think, or instantly bouncing ideas off people and refining them, which for me is that difference between introvert and extrovert. It's being aware of that. Now, one of the good things about these sessions where you're encouraging that time to just take a minute yourself and write ideas down is good, because that encourages individual thought. If you're working with a team regularly and do retros with that team, and you know you have people that actually need more time, maybe you could send round look, this is what I'm going to be asking, because then people do have that time if that's useful. Sometimes that is useful. There's nothing wrong with doing that. When we were doing the generating insight section, I talked over here with this group. We went through, I think 3 different people talked, and I was sort of like, yeah, so there was that, and who else had? And I was looking around, and as I said, there were people that I knew hadn't spoken yet, and people at the back that were starting to wander off a bit. They were sort of like, I was trying to pull back in again. So I was facilitating, you're keeping an eye out for those people. Person, eyes wandering at the back is quite a simple, how are you doing, and back in the room, and question at the back in. Some of the people, but the other people in the room, are they not speaking because they're maybe need more time to process, or actually they don't want to talk? And then there's a gauging, do you bring that in, and how do you bring that in? Because you don't, if somebody is not engaging because they want more time to think, well, then maybe you give them a little bit more time to think if you can. Maybe if you're going to ask them something, you ask them quite a question where you're sort of really clearly prepping the question or narrowing it down. So just on exploring this particular area, maybe quite a closed yes or no question to start bringing things in. And if it's someone that really doesn't want to talk, maybe they just don't want to talk, and sometimes if they're looking that uncomfortable about the whole thing, maybe you just don't, and that's not the right time. So a couple of things there. There was a big debate going on Twitter last week about whether the big thing that comes out of a retro is the action or whether it is knowledge. I suppose my fairly rubbish answer on that is it's both, because you're generating the insight, which is knowledge, but crucially, there needs to be action. It's not enough to have knowledge. As organisations, even though we talk about knowledge organisations, the reason an organisation is there to make money, and the reason a retro is there is to improve things. Coming out saying, wow, we really knowledged that up, doesn't help us see if there's going to be any kind of improvement or any change. Knowledge for knowledge's sake is nice for the individual, but useless for the company. So it needs to be knowledge. Knowledge is great, but how are we translating that into something that is then action and leading us forward? So for me, it's the action rather than knowledge, although there is a lot of knowledge that does come out of these. In terms of working, bringing independent teams together, I would try and avoid it unless there is a real common theme that you can focus them on. We had nothing in common for these sessions, and the problem with that is you're losing when we looked at the definition, it's about the team, and there was no team. I mean, there was an element of sharing ideas and giving the individual actions that we could take out of it, but we were slightly shoehorning that to make it work this evening. Now, you could do it with two separate teams in an HR team and a finance team looking at a program from a different perspective. That could be interesting as an experiment. I've never tried it, but I don't see why it wouldn't work, because you've got a common goal. And maybe if you were doing any one of these exercises, you could get quite different perspectives, and that could help those teams work together closer in the future. So there definitely could be a way of it working from that sense, but there would need to be that common objective that they're working towards, I'd say. They are time-boxed in as much as all of your meetings are generally time-boxed. You tend to book people out for a period of time. There are no hard and fast rules around how long they should take, and there are no rules or views on it being a standy-uppy session. I would argue that they probably shouldn't be standy-uppy. I would think you'd want people to get quite comfortable with them. I would feel quite comfortable changing the times around it. I wouldn't want teams to be sitting there, and you do get this with teams who sit there and say, well, why is your retro half an hour? Well, because it's always been half an hour. Okay, but you've got some particularly gnarly problems at the moment, and you didn't get, and what was the outcome? Oh, well, we didn't actually get to the actions. Then maybe let's take a longer. Maybe if you had a failed sprint, or maybe if you had a failed release, or if something went badly, maybe you would afford yourselves the perceived luxury of having a half-day retro. Maybe you really would go through maybe 2 or 3 of these generating ideas sections, and generating data, doing the insight bit, and then having a break, generating data, generating insight, before then going back and starting to pull that stuff together. And that you could do a much longer retrospective by looking at it through different lenses, different perspectives, and then bringing that down to what the actions would be. There you go, 4 years, still learning, still improving. And there is where I'm going to end it. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for getting involved and drawing faces and sticking Post-it notes. It wouldn't have been an interactive, open questioning session without all of you getting involved. So thank you for that.